Hello! Welcome back to another evening of shared theories and late-night speculation. Tonight we're diving into Stranger Things Season 5 Volume 2. I'll be covering all the predictions I can fit in for tonight, but there's definitely more to come once the finale drops. So, we'll start with a quick recap of where Volume 1 left us, then move on to what we officially know about the next 3 episodes. After that, we'll get into the theories, the death predictions, and what I think is actually going to happen when Volume 2 releases on Christmas Day. Plenty to get talking about, but if you like what I do here and want a way to support the channel, consider subscribing down below. But for now, grab your flashlight and Eggo waffles, get cozy in the upside down, and let's begin. So if you've not watched Volume 1 yet, or if it's been a minute and you need a refresher, here's where things stand after those first 4 absolutely wild episodes. Hawkins is under military quarantine. The town's been locked down since the end of Season 4, with soldiers everywhere and the government running the show. They're calling the upside-down rift an earthquake, which is mental considering half the town literally tore open. The military has set up shop in the upside-down itself, which we find out when Hopper and Eleven break into their base looking for Vecna. Instead, they find something arguably worse. But we'll get to that in a second. The biggest shock of Volume 1, and I mean this genuinely, is the reveal about Will Byers. In Episode 4, titled Sorcerer, Will discovers he has powers, actual telekinetic powers. He can tap into the hive mind, see through Demogorgon eyes, and apparently snap their limbs like twigs when he needs to. It's this massive moment where Mike, Lucas and Robin are about to be killed by a pack of Demogorgons in the tunnels, and Will just stops them all. He revisits happy memories, his friendship with Mike, Castle Byers, all of it, and then boom, he's wiping his nose like Eleven always does, staring into the distance with purpose. The kid who was taken in Season 1 is finally the one with the power to fight back. According to the Duffer Brothers, they've been planning this since the beginning. Will's connection to Vecna has always been there, simmering under the surface since he was dragged into the Upside Down back in 1983. He was Vecna's first vessel, the proof of concept that children could be broken and controlled. But now Will's turning that connection against him. He can manipulate anything in the hive mind as long as he's close enough to Vecna. It's proximity-based, which is going to be important later. Max Mayfield, on the other hand, is still trapped. She's been in Vecna's mind for 584 days. That's over a year and a half of being stuck in Henry Creel's memories, cycling through his past like some horrific time loop. She didn't die at the end of Season 4. Her body's in a coma, but her consciousness is with Vecna. Dr. Brenner warned us about this back in the day. When Vecna kills someone, he consumes them. Part of Max survived inside his mind. In Volume 1, we see her hiding in a cave. It's the one place Vecna is afraid to enter, which is properly significant. Max has made it her own, collecting bits and pieces from the memories around her. Sadie Sink mentioned in an interview that the patch on Max's jeans is actually from one of young Henry Creel's shirts, which is such a cool detail. She's been trying to escape, and she almost made it once when Lucas was playing Running Up That Hill next to her hospital bed. But Vecna chased her back, and she's been hunkered down in that cave ever since. Then Holly Wheeler gets kidnapped. This is huge because it mirrors Will's disappearance almost exactly. She's taken by a Demogorgon in Episode 2, titled The Vanishing of Holly Wheeler, which should sound familiar. The Duffers have said they wanted to bring things full circle, and Holly's storyline is a major part of that. She meets someone she calls Mr. Whatsit, which is a reference to A Wrinkle in Time, her favourite book. Mr. Whatsit is actually Henry Creel's more human form, the version of him that still exists before he became fully Vecna. She ends up trapped in his mindscape, which Holly names Camazotz after the sinister plane from her book. Max finds her and brings her to the safety of the cave. Now here's where things get really interesting. Hopper and Eleven infiltrate the military base in the Upside Down, expecting to find Vecna. Instead, they find 8 Carly, Eleven's sister from Season 2. She's being held behind a massive steel door in what Dr. K calls the greenhouse. The military has labelled her as their kryptonite, though what that actually means is still a bit unclear. Dr. K is this new antagonist, played by Linda Hamilton, who doesn't understand the experiments or Henry's history like Brenner did. She just sees 11 as a weapon she needs to acquire. She's hunting 11 relentlessly, and unlike Brenner, she's got zero emotional attachment or conflicted feelings about it. We also learn about Vecna's master plan. He needs 12 children, all between the ages of 9 and 11, to act as vessels. Will was the first back in 1983, the one who showed Vecna that kids could be broken and controlled more easily than adults. There's this mysterious meat wall in the military base, covered in upside-down vines, and these bulging sacs that look absolutely disgusting. Dr. K is shown dissecting one of them. In the opening flashback of the season, we see Vecna inject something into Will when he was first taken, the same kind of substance that's in those sacs. He's building something with these kids, some kind of cult or army or worse. And finally, at the end of episode 4, Steve, Nancy, Jonathan, Robin, and Dustin chase a Demogorgon into a portal in the side of a grain silo. They go through, and now they're stuck in the upside down. Properly stuck, which means half our main crew is trapped in the most dangerous place in the world, right as everything's about to kick off. Ted and Karen Wheeler are in the hospital after a Demogorgon attack at their house. Ted's in a coma, Karen's gravely injured but conscious. The whole Wheeler family is falling apart just when Nancy and Mike need them most. That's where Volume 1 leaves us. Will's got powers, Max is playing protector in Vecna's mind, Holly's trapped in there with her, 8 is back and being held captive, Dr. K is on a warpath, and half the crew is in the upside down. It's a lot, and Volume 2 has 3 episodes to either resolve it all or make it so much worse before the finale. Now let's talk about what the Duffers and cast have actually confirmed about what's coming in these next episodes. Before we get into theories and wild speculation, let's establish what we actually know for certain about these next 3 episodes. Because the Duffers and the cast have been surprisingly chatty in interviews, and there's quite a bit they've confirmed. First up, the runtimes. Episode 5, Shock Jock, clocks in at around 70 minutes. Episode 6, Escape from Camazotz, is the longest of the 3 at 75 minutes. And Episode 7, The Bridge, runs about 72 minutes. So we're looking at just under 3.5 hours of content total for Volume 2. That's not counting the finale, which is a separate beast entirely, at 2 hours and 5 minutes. But we'll get to that later. Ross Duffer posted on Instagram that all 3 episodes are locked, mixed, scored, and coloured, which means they're done. Completely finished. He also gave us some hints about each one. Shock Jock, according to Ross, is far darker and far scarier than anything else in Volume 1. It picks up immediately after Sorcerer, so there's no time jump. Whatever happened at the end of Episode 4, with Will's powers and everyone scattered, that's where we start. The title itself is interesting. Shock Jock could refer to radio, communication, or maybe something more literal. We'll have to wait and see. Escape from Camazotz, Episode 6, is the one that makes the Duffers cry every time they watch it. Ross specifically said the performances in this episode are incredible, which is pretty high praise coming from someone who's seen every take of every scene. This is also the biggest episode of the 3 in terms of scale and runtime. If Max and Holly are escaping from Vecna's mindscape, like the title suggests, it's going to be emotional, and probably devastating. Episode 7, The Bridge, is described as probably the most emotional chapter of the season, aside from the finale. It was co-directed by Matt and Ross Duffer, along with Sean Levy, which tells you how important it is. This is the penultimate episode of the entire series. Everything needs to be in place by the end of this one for the finale to work. The Duffers have also confirmed that pretty early on in Volume 2, we're going to start understanding everything about the Upside Down. Ross told Deadline that Volume 2 is really where they get into the Upside Down and explain what it is. They've been holding on to this information since Season 1. There's a 25-page mythology document they wrote for Netflix back in the day that goes into the Upside Down's origins, and most of those answers have been saved for Season 5. Ross said they punted the last remaining questions to have some big reveals here. So if you've been waiting 9 years to know why the Upside Down exists and why it's frozen on November 6th, 1983, you're about to get your answer. Holly Wheeler's storyline is apparently key to understanding why Will was kidnapped in the first place. Matt Duffer told Deadline that especially as we get into Volume 2, we start to answer more and more why Will was taken and how it ties in with Holly and all of this. Everything sort of comes full circle, he said, which tracks with what we saw in Volume 1. Holly and Will are mirrors of each other, both taken at similar ages, both encountering Vecna in different forms. There's also going to be more of Vecna's memories. The Duffers called this the New Russia storyline, which is a reference to Season 4 when Hopper was separated from everyone else. In Season 5, Max and Holly are the ones separated, stuck in Vecna's mindscape, and we're going to be exploring much more of his backstory. They said they're very happy with how it integrates with the other storylines, which suggests it's not just flashbacks for the sake of flashbacks. It's all connected to the main plot. Music is going to play a major role. Matt Duffer told Deadline there are some really cool but very different musical moments in Volume 2 and in the finale. He emphasised very different, which is interesting because Stranger Things has a pattern with music. Running Up That Hill, Master of Puppets, Never-Ending Story. These are huge iconic moments. So what does very different mean? We'll find out soon enough. And here's the one everyone's been dreading. The Duffers confirmed that Season 5 will feature the most violent death of any season. They didn't say which episode, but Volume 1 had 0 major character deaths, which means Volume 2 or the finale is where it happens. Someone's dying, and it's going to be brutal. Oh, and one more thing, the connection between Vecna and the Mind Flayer will be answered in the final episode, not Volume 2, the finale. The Duffers told Variety that it's a question that will be answered in the final episode, so we're going to have to wait until New Year's Eve for that particular reveal. But it's coming, and apparently it's been meticulously planned for a decade. Shannon Purser, who played Barb, is confirmed to appear in Volume 2 as well. Whether that's a flashback, a vision, or something weirder, we don't know yet. But Barb's back, and for Nancy's arc, that's going to matter. So that's everything we know for certain. Official statements, confirmed details, no speculation. Now let's get into the fun part, which is what all of this might actually mean, and where I think the story's going. Let's start with the elephant in the room. Will Byers and his newfound powers. Will Byers has powers. After 9 years and 5 seasons, the kid who got taken first is finally the key to everything. And I mean everything. Let's break down exactly how Will's powers work, because they're different from Eleven's in some really important ways. Will can tap into the hive mind. That's the psychic network that connects Vecna to all the creatures of the Upside Down. The Demogorgons, the Mind Flayer, everything. When Will concentrates, he can see through their eyes. He experiences what they experience. And more importantly, he can control them. In Episode 4, we see him snap Demogorgon limbs with just arm gestures and mental focus. He kills multiple Demogorgons in seconds, saving Mike, Lucas, and Robin from certain death. But here's the catch. Will's powers are entirely proximity-based. According to Matt Duffer, Will can only access these abilities when he's close enough to Vecna. The connection between them is what makes it possible. You'll see how far he can take it as you continue to watch, Matt said in an interview. But that's how he's able to manipulate the monsters. He taps into the hive mind, and then he can manipulate anything within it. So he can't open a door because a door isn't part of the hive mind. But a Demogorgon? That's fair game. The reason Will has these powers at all goes back to 1983. Vecna took him first. Will was his proof of concept, the experiment that showed children between the ages of 9 and 11 could be broken and controlled more easily than adults or teenagers. Will spent days in the Upside Down, connected to Vecna's network. Then in Season 2, the Mind Flayer possessed him directly, pumping that weird dust into his system and giving him the now memories he experienced. That connection never fully went away. It's been dormant, waiting. and now Will's figured out how to weaponize it. Noah Schnapp, who plays Will, has said the dynamic between Will and Vecna reminds him of Harry Potter and Voldemort. For Will, we start to learn the parallels between Will and Vecna, and it almost felt very Harry Potter to me, he told Deadline. I had to go back and re-watch the movies because the Harry Potter-Voldemort relationship felt very close to Will and Vecna. That's a pretty apt comparison when you think about it. Both connected through trauma, both able to see into each other's minds, both tied together by something neither of them fully understands or controls. But the bigger question is this: can Will use these powers without Vecna using him? Because at the end of episode 4, Vecna tells Will something chilling. We're going to do such beautiful things together. You're going to help me one last time. Vecna doesn't sound worried about Will's newfound abilities. If anything, he sounds pleased, like this was part of the plan all along. Matt Duffer addressed this in an interview. You'll see as it goes on, but Vecna completely underestimates Will, he said. He perceives him in the way that so many others have in his life, which is as weak as nothing, as incapable of achieving anything great. So he completely underestimates him in that moment. Whether that's going to happen again, you'll have to watch Volume 2. That last bit is important, whether that's going to happen again, which suggests maybe Vecna learns his lesson. Maybe he stops underestimating Will and starts actively trying to control him or turn him against his friends. There's also the emotional component to how Will's powers work. The trigger for his abilities in episode 4 wasn't just proximity to Vecna or desperation, it was acceptance. Will had a conversation with Robin earlier in the volume where she talked about her first crush, Tammy, and how heartbroken she was when Tammy hooked up with Steve. Robin told Will, I was looking for answers in someone else, but I had all the answers. It's a conversation about identity and self-acceptance. And in the moment when Will needs to save his friends, he thinks back to that. He revisits happy memories, his makeshift fort, Castle Byers, his friendship with Mike Wheeler, all the things that make him who he is. And that's when the powers activate. The Duffers have talked about this. There's a lot that Will has been dealing with over the course of the 4 seasons prior to this, Matt said. So many emotions and inner conflicts that remain unresolved. We wanted him to grow as a human and become a fully formed version of who he is. And once he's able to do that, he's able to harness these incredible powers. It's actually pretty tragic when you think about it. Will has spent 5 seasons being the victim, the one who got taken, the one who got possessed, the one who couldn't quite fit in. He's been fearful, uncertain, struggling with his identity in ways the other characters haven't had to deal with as publicly. And the moment he finally starts accepting himself, loving himself, that's when he becomes powerful enough to fight back. There's something beautiful about that, but also deeply sad, because it took 9 years of trauma to get here. Noah Schnapp has said he's excited to see Will come into his own. I'm excited to see him exploring his identity and interacting with his friends and understanding more of his connection to the Upside Down, he told Netflix. He's more than just the kid who got kidnapped, and this season you see what's beyond that and the layers beneath him. The other thing about Will's powers is how they manifest physically. Millie Bobby Brown and Noah Schnapp both emphasised that Will's abilities work differently from Eleven's. It was originally supposed to work in the same way that Eleven's powers do, Noah said, but as you read the scripts in Volume 2, it comes in a different way than hers. So making sure that the physicality of that shows that it works different. We've seen Eleven get nosebleeds, strain herself, sometimes pass out from overexertion. Will's powers seem more intuitive, more connected to emotion and memory than pure mental force. But we'll have to see how that develops in Volume 2. If Will's pushing himself too hard or using his abilities too often, there might be consequences we haven't seen yet. One more thing, there's a fun Dungeons and Dragons connection here that I think is worth mentioning. Mike calls Will a sorcerer in episode 4, not a wizard. In D&D, that distinction matters. Wizards learn magic through study and discipline. Sorcerers are born with it. Their power comes from their bloodline, from trauma, from something innate they can't control. Will the Wise was always described as a wizard in their campaigns, but Mike's right. Will's a sorcerer. His powers aren't learned. They're part of him now, whether he wants them or not. So here's where I think this is going. Will's powers are the game changer everyone needs to defeat Vecna. But they're also a massive risk. The closer Will gets to Vecna, the more he can do. But the closer he gets, the more vulnerable he is to Vecna's influence. It's a balancing act, and one wrong move could mean Vecna takes control of Will entirely. We've seen Will possessed before in Season 2. We know what that looks like. And I think Volume 2 is going to push Will to the edge of that happening again. The question isn't whether Will's powerful enough to help. The question is whether he's strong enough to resist being used. And speaking of Vecna's plans to use people, let's talk about what he's actually building with all those kidnapped children. Vecna isn't just kidnapping kids for fun. He's building something, and it's worse than we thought. The plan, as far as we can piece together from Volume 1, involves 12 children, specifically children between the ages of 9 and 11. Will Byers was the first in 1983, when he was 11 years old. Holly Wheeler is one of the most recent, and there are at least 10 others trapped in Vecna's mindscape right now, all of them the same age range, all of them taken from Hawkins over the course of the season. But why 12? And why that specific age? The age part makes a twisted kind of sense once you hear Vecna's reasoning. Children at that age are easier to break. Their minds are still forming, still vulnerable. They haven't built up the same defences that teenagers or adults have. Vecna himself said as much in Volume 1. Will showed him what was possible. When Vecna took Will in 1983, he discovered that an 11-year-old boy could be controlled, manipulated, turned into a vessel without too much resistance. Will survived in the Upside Down for days connected to Vecna's hive mind, and he came back changed. Traumatized, yes, but also marked. Vecna could see through his eyes in Season 2. He could possess him. Will was the proof of concept. So now Vecna's scaling up. 12 vessels, all perfectly broken and controlled, all connected to him through the hive mind. But for what purpose exactly? There's a few theories floating around, and I think the most likely one ties into the Dungeons and Dragons references that have been woven into the show since day one. In Season 4, Eddie Munson ran a Hellfire Club campaign that introduced the concept of the Cult of Vecna. In D&D lore, Vecna has followers, disciples who serve him and carry out his will. The game treats it as this dark religious organisation, and now in Season 5, we're seeing that concept come to life. Vecna isn't just creating weapons, he's creating worshippers, or maybe batteries, some kind of psychic network that amplifies his power and lets him reshape reality the way he wants. Matt Duffer has said that Holly's storyline helps explain why Will was kidnapped. Everything sort of comes full circle, he told Deadline, which suggests Will wasn't random. None of this is random. Vecna has been planning this for decades, possibly since he was a child himself. The opening flashback in Episode 1 shows Vecna injecting something into Will when he first took him. That same substance appears in the bulging sacs on the meat wall in the military base. Dr. K is shown dissecting one of them, trying to figure out what it is. It looks organic, almost alive, and it's connected to every child Vecna has taken. Here's where it gets really interesting. In the first episode of Volume 1, Erica Sinclair rolls a natural 20 during a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. A natural 20 is the best possible roll. It's an automatic, critical success. And in the campaign, it defeats Vecna. The DM, one of the Hellfire Club kids, describes Vecna being vanquished by this perfect roll. Now that could just be a fun little Easter egg, or it could be foreshadowing. Because if you do the math on the powered individuals we know about, it gets interesting. 11 plus 8 equals 19. But now, Will has powers too. He's channeling Vecna's abilities, which makes him effectively 1 in terms of power source. So you've got 11 plus 8 plus 1, which equals 20. The exact number needed to defeat Vecna, according to the D&D campaign. I might be reaching here, but the Duffers love their symbolism, and the numbers line up too perfectly to ignore. The 12 vessels also tie into this. If Vecna successfully completes his plan and has 12 children under his control, all amplifying his power through the hive mind, then the heroes are going to need every advantage they can get. 11 alone wasn't enough in Season 4. She lost. Vecna opened the gates and tore Hawkins apart. So now the equation has changed. You've got 11, you've got Carly with her illusion powers, and you've got Will who can manipulate the hive mind from the inside. That's the 20th. That's the critical hit that might actually work. But only if Vecna doesn't get his 12 vessels operational first. There's also the question of what happens to the kids if Vecna succeeds. Are they gone forever, consumed like Dr. Brenner warned, or is there a way to save them? Max has been trapped for 584 days, and she's still herself, still fighting. Holly's only been there for a short time, and she's already found Max and taken shelter in the cave. So maybe consciousness can survive in Vecna's mindscape longer than we think. Maybe there's a window to rescue them before they're fully converted into whatever Vecna wants them to become. The meat wall is the physical manifestation of this, I think. It's in the Upside Down, in the military base, surrounded by soldiers who have no idea what they're actually guarding. Those sacks aren't just random growths, they're connected to the children. When Vecna injects that substance into a victim, it links them to the wall, to the hive mind, to him. It's like a psychic umbilical cord. And if you cut it, if you destroy the wall or disrupt the connection, maybe you free the kids. Or maybe you kill them. We don't know yet. Dr. K is obviously interested in this for all the wrong reasons. She's dissecting the sacks, trying to reverse engineer whatever Vecna's doing, but she doesn't understand the experiments or the history behind them. She's not Dr. Brenner. Brenner was conflicted, obsessed, but he knew what he was dealing with. Doctor. Kay just sees a weapon she wants to control, which makes her dangerous in a completely different way. If Vecna gets his 12 vessels, if he completes whatever ritual or transformation he's planning, then his new world order becomes real. He talked about it in Season 4, a world reshaped in his image, free from the structures and rules he hates, and 12 psychically connected children, all amplifying his power, would give him the ability to do exactly that. Not just in Hawkins, everywhere. So the stakes aren't just about closing the Upside Down or defeating one villain. It's about stopping a fundamental reshaping of reality itself. Peak evil mastermind logic, no notes. Which brings us to the wild card that nobody saw coming. In one of Volume 1's biggest surprises, 8 is back. And she might be exactly what 11 needs. Kali Prasad, also known as 8 or 008, was introduced way back in Season 2 in that divisive episode, The Lost Sister. You know the one. 11 runs away to Chicago, finds her sister from the Hawkins lab experiments, and they go on this whole revenge mission against the people who hurt their mother. A lot of people hated that episode at the time. It felt disconnected from the main story, like a backdoor pilot for a spin-off nobody asked for. But now, 3 seasons later, the Duffers are bringing Carly back in a major way. And according to them, it's not just to tie up a loose thread. Ross Duffer told Variety that bringing Carly back really helped them with the 11 storyline and how they wanted to wrap her story up. So there was a real reason to do it beyond just not leaving this dangling plot thread, he said. They also mentioned they really like Linnea Berthelsen, the actress who plays Carly, and felt that Season 2 episode didn't give her a chance to do what they knew she was capable of. So part of this is giving her a proper moment. But what does Carly actually bring to the table? Her powers are different from 11's. Carly can create illusions. She can make people see things that aren't there, experience things that aren't happening. In Season 2, we saw her conjure spiders out of thin air to terrify someone. She created a massive steel wall from the ground to block the police. She made 11 see her dead mother standing in front of her. These aren't real objects. They're psychic projections, hallucinations that feel completely real to whoever's experiencing them. And depending on how strong Carly is, those illusions can affect multiple people at once. Now here's where it gets interesting. The military is holding Carly in the Upside Down base behind a giant steel door. They're calling her their kryptonite, which is a weird choice of words. Kryptonite weakens Superman, right? It's the one thing that can neutralize him. So what does Dr. K think Carly can do? Neutralize 11? Or neutralize Vecna? I think it's the latter. Carly's illusion powers might be the one thing that can disrupt Vecna's psychic abilities. If she can project illusions into someone's mind and Vecna's whole deal is invading minds and trapping people in his memories, then maybe Carly can fight fire with fire. She could shield people from his influence, or confuse him, or even trap him in an illusion of his own. There's a scene in the Volume 2 trailer where 11 says to Carly, "Help me find him, kill him," which suggests they're working together by that point. 11's broken her out of the military base, or maybe Hopper did, and now they're teaming up to take down Vecna. Two sisters from the Hawkins lab experiments, both with powers that complement each other. 11's raw psychic force combined with Carly's illusions. That's a pretty formidable combination. Some fans are theorizing that Carly could help Max and Holly escape from Camazotz. If Carly can project illusions into Vecna's mindscape, she might be able to create a distraction or a false reality that lets them slip away. Episode 6 is literally called Escape from Camazotz, and Carly's abilities seem tailor-made for exactly that kind of mission. She could make Vecna see something that isn't there while Max and Holly make a run for it, or she could create a psychic shield that blocks Vecna from detecting them. The Duffers have called bringing Carly back a big swing, which tells you how much they're betting on this working. It's a risk to resurrect a character from an unpopular episode and make her crucial to the ending. But if they pull it off, if Carly's role in Volume 2 justifies her return and ties everything together, then Season 2, Episode 7 retroactively becomes essential viewing instead of a skippable detour. There's also the numerology angle I mentioned earlier. 11 plus 8 equals 19. Add Will's connection to Vecna, and you've got your natural 20. The perfect role to defeat the big bad. Whether that's literal or just thematic, it's a nice bit of symmetry. What's wild is that the military had Carly this whole time and didn't know what to do with her. Dr. K saw her as a tool, something to study and weaponize, but she fundamentally misunderstood what Carly represents. Carly isn't a weapon against 11. She's 11's greatest ally, her sister, and together they might be unstoppable. I'm also curious about how Carly and 11's relationship has evolved since Season 2. They parted on decent terms, with 11 realizing she needed to go back to Hawkins, and Carly accepting that choice. But years have passed. Carly's been in captivity, probably tortured or experimented on by Dr. K and her team. 11's been on the run, hiding from the very same people. There's going to be some heavy emotional beats when they reunite properly. And if Carly does help rescue Max and Holly from Vecna's mind, that's going to be one hell of a redemption arc for a character a lot of people wrote off years ago. Carly's back, and if her illusions can work in Vecna's mindscape, she might be the key to everything, or at least a very important piece of the puzzle. But while Carly might help on the psychic front, there's still the matter of half our crew being physically trapped in the worst place possible. At the end of Volume 1, 5 of our favourite characters went through a portal and ended up in the worst possible place. Steve Harrington, Nancy Wheeler, Jonathan Byers, Robin Buckley, and Dustin Henderson chased a Demogorgon into a grain silo. There was a portal in the side of the structure, this tear in reality that led straight into the Upside Down. And instead of regrouping or calling for backup, they went through. Now they're trapped, properly trapped. The Upside Down isn't like it was in Season 1 when Joyce could communicate with Will through Christmas lights. It's not even like Season 4 when you could still navigate somewhat safely if you knew what you were doing. The military has been occupying parts of it, setting up bases and conducting experiments. Vecna's influence is everywhere. And these 5 just walked right into the heart of it with no plan and no way back. According to the trailer and various interviews, they're heading toward Hawkins' lab, or what's left of it in the Upside Down. The lab has always been the epicenter of everything. It's where 11 was raised, where the original gate was opened, where Vecna was sent through in the first place. If there's anywhere in the Upside Down that holds answers, it's there. But it's also the most dangerous location they could possibly go. Steve and Dustin's friendship is going to be tested in Volume 2. There's a moment in the trailer where they have what the Duffers described as a fight to the death pact. I don't know exactly what that means, but it sounds ominous. Steve and Dustin have this big brother-little brother dynamic that's been one of the best parts of the show since season 2. If something happens to either of them, it's going to absolutely wreck the other one. And here's the thing. Steve Harrington is the most popular death prediction for Volume 2 or the finale. He was originally supposed to die in Season 1. The Duffers have confirmed this multiple times. Steve was meant to be this terrible boyfriend who gets killed off, but Joe Keery's performance was so good that they kept him around and turned him into one of the most beloved characters on the show. But that original plan has been hanging over Steve's head for 9 seasons now. At some point, the Duffers might decide to pull that trigger. There's also the love triangle. Steve, Nancy, and Jonathan have been stuck in this unresolved romantic tension since Season 1. Nancy chose Jonathan at the end of Season 2, but her feelings for Steve clearly never went away. In Season 4, there was that moment in the Upside Down where Steve talked about his dream future with Nancy, the RV and the kids, and the whole domestic fantasy. And Nancy didn't shut him down. She listened. She even seemed to consider it. But Jonathan's still in the picture, and all 3 of them are now trapped in the Upside Down together. That's a recipe for either closure or tragedy. If Steve dies saving Nancy or Jonathan, that resolves the triangle in the most heartbreaking way possible. It gives Steve a heroic ending, cements his character arc from selfish jerk to selfless hero, and devastates everyone watching. I'm not going to lie, I'm proper worried about Steve. Robin, on the other hand, feels slightly safer. She's never been in mortal danger the way Steve has. Her role in the story is different. She's the emotional support, the voice of reason, the one who helps other people process their feelings. Killing her off would be cruel without much narrative payoff. But that doesn't mean she's invincible. The Duffers did say, "This is the most violent death of any season. Anything's possible." Jonathan's in a weird position. He's been sidelined a lot in the past couple seasons, dealing with personal stuff and not really getting the spotlight. Charlie Heaton has also been busy with other projects. If the Duffers need to trim the cast for the finale, Jonathan might be on the chopping block. His death would devastate Will and Joyce, which gives it emotional weight. But it would also feel a bit random unless it's built up properly in Volume 2. Dustin, I think, survives. He's the heart of the party in a lot of ways. Losing him would break the show's soul. Plus, Gaten Matarazzo has talked in interviews about Dustin's journey in a way that suggests there's a future for him beyond this season. But beyond the death speculation, there's the question of what this group is actually going to find in the Upside Down. The Duffers promised that early in Volume 2 we're going to understand everything about this place. Its origins, why it's frozen in 1983, what it actually is. And this crew, trapped and searching for answers in the Hawkins Lab ruins, seems like the perfect vehicle for those revelations. Nancy's always been the investigator. She's the one who digs for truth, who doesn't stop until she gets answers. If anyone's going to piece together the mystery of the Upside Down, it's her. Steve's the protector, keeping everyone alive while Nancy does the detective work. Jonathan's the documenter, the one who sees things through a lens and captures what others miss. Robin's the academic, the one who connects dots and understands patterns. And Dustin's the science nerd, who can translate complex concepts into something the audience can understand. They're the perfect team for uncovering the truth, as long as they all survive long enough to share it. There's also the military compound they might stumble into. Hopper and Eleven broke into it in Volume 1, but they were focused on finding Vecna or Carly. Steve's group might discover something different. More experiments, more secrets, maybe even Dr. K herself, if she's operating out of there. The military has been trying to weaponize the Upside Down and its creatures. If Steve's crew interferes with that, it could cause a whole new set of problems. The trailer shows them in some pretty dire situations, running from creatures, navigating the twisted landscape, looking absolutely exhausted and terrified. Episode 5 is described as far darker and far scarier than anything in Volume 1. I'm guessing a good chunk of that darkness involves this group struggling to survive, Whether they all make it out is anyone's guess. But Volume 2 should finally give us the answers we've been waiting for about what the Upside Down actually is and why it exists in the first place. And speaking of the Upside Down, let's talk about the biggest mystery of the entire show. For 9 years, we've been asking, what is the Upside Down? Volume 2 is finally going to tell us. The Upside Down has been the central mystery since Will Byers vanished in episode 1 of season 1. We've seen it, we've explored it, we've watched our characters fight in it and barely survive it. But we've never really understood what it is or why it exists. The Duffers have been holding on to this information since the beginning. They wrote a 25-page mythology document for Netflix back when they first pitched the show, and most of those answers have been saved for season 5. Ross Duffer said they punted the last remaining questions to have some big reveals here. And according to him, pretty early on in Volume 2, we're going to start understanding everything. So let's talk about the theories and what we might actually learn. The biggest question is why the Upside Down is frozen on November 6th, 1983. That's the day Will Byers disappeared. That's the exact date. Nancy noticed it in season 4 when she was trapped there with Steve. Her bedroom in the Upside Down had her diary sitting on the desk, and the last entry was from November 6th, 1983. Everything in the Upside Down is a snapshot of Hawkins from that specific moment, preserved like a twisted time capsule. But why? The prevailing theory, and the one I think is most likely correct, is that the Upside Down isn't a separate dimension at all. It's a corrupted version of our world, tied directly to Henry Creel's trauma and memories. When 11 blasted Henry into the Upside Down at the end of the Hawkins Lab massacre, that's when it took shape. Before that moment, what existed was Dimension X, this primordial space full of particles and storms, and the Mind Flayer in its original form. Henry landed there, connected with the Mind Flayer, and started reshaping everything around him. But the date is specific. November 6th, 1983 is when Henry took his first vessel, Will Byers. That's when Henry's plan truly began. That's when the Upside Down locked itself to Hawkins and stopped changing. It's like Henry imprinted his intent onto the dimension at that exact moment, and everything froze. The Upside Down became a reflection of Hawkins, not because it was always meant to be, but because Henry made it that way. He needed a connection to the real world, a mirror of the place he hated, so he could corrupt it and eventually reshape it. There's also the cave, the one Max hides in, the one Vecna is afraid to enter. That cave is hugely significant, and I think it ties into Henry's childhood. According to the stage play, Stranger Things. The first shadow, young Henry Creel wandered into a cave in Nevada when he was a kid. He found stolen government tech inside, some kind of portal or device that transported him to Dimension X. That's where he got his powers. That's where he first encountered the Mind Flayer. And that cave, that specific place, is the origin point of everything that went wrong in Henry's life. So when Max finds a cave in Vecna's mindscape that scares him, it's not random. It's that cave, the one that changed him, the one that represents his loss of innocence or his first real trauma. He can't go in there because confronting that memory, that origin point, would break something in him. It's his weakness, and Max has figured it out, probably by accident, and she's using it to stay alive. Dustin says in the Volume 2 trailer, everything we've ever assumed about the Upside Down has been dead wrong, which suggests whatever the Duffers reveal is going to flip everything on its head. Maybe the Upside Down isn't controlled by Vecna. Maybe it's controlling him. Maybe it's an organism that responds to psychic energy, and Henry's just the most powerful psychic it's latched onto. Or maybe the Upside Down is hell, not literally, but metaphorically, and Vecna is trying to escape it just as much as he's trying to use it. There's been a lot of talk about time travel in the Season 5 marketing. The official synopsis mentioned time itself unraveling, which is a pretty loaded phrase. Max has been experiencing Vecna's memories in a non-linear way, jumping between different points in his past. She saw the day 11 sent him to the Upside Down. She saw his high school years with a young Joyce Byers. She's travelling through time in a sense, just not physically. She's experiencing temporal displacement through memory. But what if that's a clue to something bigger? What if the upside down doesn't follow linear time the way our world does? What if it's a place where past, present, and future exist simultaneously? And that's why it's frozen in 1983, while also being responsive to events happening now. It would explain how Vecna can see so much, plan so far ahead, manipulate events across decades. He's not just psychic, he's temporally unstable. He exists in multiple points in time at once. That might sound crazy, but it's not out of the realm of possibility for this show. There's also the Mind Flayer to consider. We saw in Season 4 that Henry encountered the Mind Flayer in Dimension X and seemed to mould it into the spider shape we recognise. He made it look like a monster from his childhood, a spider he'd killed and felt connected to. But did Henry really control the Mind Flayer? Or did the Mind Flayer let him think he was in control? The Duffers confirm that the connection between Vecna and the Mind Flayer will be answered in the finale, not Volume 2. So we're going to have to wait for that particular revelation. But I think the answer is going to be that the Mind Flayer is the real puppet master here. It's been using Henry all along, feeding off his trauma and rage, amplifying his worst impulses. Vecna thinks he's the big bad, the one reshaping reality. But the Mind Flayer is the true hive mind ruler, and Henry's just another pawn. If that's the case, then the final battle isn't against Vecna. It's against the Mind Flayer, with Vecna potentially becoming an unlikely ally when he realises he's been manipulated this whole time. But all of that is speculation. What we know for certain is that Volume 2 is going to explain the Upside Down's origins, its connection to Henry, and why it's been frozen in time for over 40 years. The Duffers have been planning this reveal for a decade. They've said it's meticulously crafted and that everything we've seen has been building to this moment. Whatever the truth is, it's going to change everything we thought we knew. And honestly, I can't wait. Now, speaking of people trapped in impossible situations, let's talk about Max. Max has been trapped in Vecna's mind for 584 days. That's over a year and a half of cycling through Henry Creel's worst memories. Think about that for a second. 584 days. While her body lies in a coma in a hospital bed, with Lucas sitting beside her playing Kate Bush, Max's consciousness has been stuck in what Holly Wheeler named Camazotz. It's a reference to a wrinkle in time, the sinister plane where everyone's minds are controlled by a dark force. Holly called Vecna's mindscape that because it's the closest thing she could compare it to from her favourite book. And honestly, it's pretty accurate. Max isn't just passively trapped there, she's been actively surviving. When we see her in Volume 1, she's made the cave her own. Sadie Sink talked about this in an interview. Max has collected bits and pieces from the memories around her, creating this little refuge. There's a patch on her jeans that's actually from one of young Henry Creel's shirts, which is such a cool detail. She's literally wearing pieces of his past to protect herself in his present. The cave is the key to everything. Vecna won't go in there. He can't. It terrifies him in a way that nothing else does, and Max figured this out. When Vecna was chasing her through his memories, trying to consume her completely, she stumbled into this cave, and he stopped. He circled around it, threatened her, tried to lure her out, but he wouldn't enter. So Max stayed. For 584 days, she's been hiding in the one place the most powerful psychic entity in the universe is afraid of. But why is Vecna afraid of that cave? According to Stranger Things, The First Shadow, the stage prequel that explores Henry's backstory, young Henry Creel found a cave in Nevada when he was a child. Inside that cave was stolen government technology, some kind of portal or experimental device, and when Henry touched it or activated it, he was transported to Dimension X. That's where he got his powers. That's where he first encountered the Mind Flayer. That's the moment that changed his entire life and set him on the path to becoming Vecna. So the cave in his mindscape isn't just any cave, it's that cave, the origin point, the place where Henry Creel stopped being a lonely, misunderstood kid and started becoming a monster. It represents his trauma, his transformation, maybe even his regret if he's capable of feeling that anymore. and he can't face it. He can't confront what happened there because it would break whatever's left of his humanity. Max has weaponized his weakness, and she's been using it to keep herself, and now Holly alive. Episode 6 of Volume 2 is called Escape from Camazotz. That's not subtle. That's a pretty clear indication that Max and Holly, and probably some of the other trapped kids, are going to attempt an escape. The question is how, and whether they'll succeed. This is where Carly comes in, I think. If Carly can project illusions into Vecna's mindscape, she could create a distraction. Make Vecna see something that isn't there while Max and Holly make a run for it. Or she could create a psychic shield that hides them from his perception entirely. Carly's powers are tailor-made for this kind of mission, and the Duffers have said episode 6 is the one that makes them cry every time they watch it because of the performances. That suggests something deeply emotional happens. A sacrifice, maybe. Or a reunion, or both. There's also the question of how someone escapes a mindscape. Max tried once before. Lucas was playing Running Up That Hill next to her hospital bed, and the music almost pulled her back to reality. She could feel herself being drawn toward her body, toward consciousness. But Vecna chased her, and she missed her window. So music is a potential escape route. We know music has power in this universe. It's saved Max before. It could save her again. But there are at least 10 other kids trapped in there with her. Can they all escape? Or does Max have to make a choice? Save herself and Holly, or stay behind to help the others? That's the kind of impossible decision that would make the Duffers cry during every viewing. It's also the kind of decision that fits Max's character. She's a protector. She's been watching over Holly this whole time. If she has to sacrifice her own chance at freedom to give the other kids a shot, she'd do it without hesitation. Sadie Sink has talked about Max's journey in a way that suggests she's not done yet. There's a reason she was kept alive at the end of Season 4 instead of just dying there. The Duffers have a plan for her. Whether that plan includes her waking up and reuniting with Lucas, or dying heroically to save everyone else, we'll find out soon enough. There's also the possibility that escaping Vecna's mind doesn't mean waking up. Max's body has been in a coma for over a year and a half. Even if her consciousness breaks free from Vecna, there's no guarantee her body can sustain her anymore. Lucas has been playing music, talking to her, holding her hand, but medically speaking, she should probably be dead. The fact that she's not suggests something supernatural is keeping her alive. Vecna's connection, maybe. And if that connection is severed, does she wake up or does she die? I honestly think Max survives Volume 2, but in a changed state. Maybe she wakes up, but she's different. Maybe she keeps some kind of link to the Upside Down, or to Vecna's memories. Maybe she becomes a bridge between worlds, which would be tragic, but also thematically appropriate. She's been the girl who faced death and came back before. Doing it again, but with permanent consequences, feels like the kind of story the Duffers would tell. One more thing. The cave that Vecna fears might also be the key to defeating him. If that's his origin point, the place where everything went wrong, then maybe that's where he's most vulnerable. Max has been living in his weakness for 584 days. She knows it better than anyone. When the final confrontation happens, that knowledge could be what tips the balance. Max has survived the impossible before, but escaping Vecna's mind might be her hardest challenge yet. And whether she makes it out alone or brings an army of rescued kids with her, Episode 6 is going to wreck us emotionally. And while Max fights for escape, there's another young person who's just beginning to understand how deep this goes. Holly Wheeler went from background character to absolutely crucial in about 4 episodes, and there's a reason for that. For 4 seasons, Holly was just Mike and Nancy's little sister. She had maybe a dozen lines total across the entire show. The Price twins, who originally played her, were adorable, but the character never did much beyond stand in the background, looking confused, while supernatural chaos unfolded around her family. Then Season 5 recast the role with Nell Fisher, aged Holly, up to about 9 or 10 years old, and suddenly she's at the centre of everything. Episode 2 is literally called The Vanishing of Holly Wheeler. If that sounds familiar, it should. Episode 1 of Season 1 was the vanishing of Will Byers. The Duffers are making the parallel explicit. They're not even trying to hide it. Matt Duffer told Deadline that they wanted to bring the show full circle, and a lot of things are echoing what happened in Season 1. Some things are playing on repeat on purpose, he said. In some ways, this season was always built as a true follow-up to Season 1. So Holly's kidnapping isn't random. It's the exact same pattern as Will's. Both were taken at similar ages. Both encountered Vexner, though in different forms. Both ended up in his mindscape. The difference is that Holly has Max there to protect her, whereas Will was completely alone. And Holly has her favourite book, A Wrinkle in Time, which gives her a framework for understanding what's happening to her. That book matters more than you'd think. In A Wrinkle in Time, the protagonist Meg travels to a planet called Camazotz, where everyone's minds are controlled by a dark force called IT. It's a place where individuality is crushed and free will doesn't exist. When Holly ends up in Vecna's mindscape, she recognises the similarities immediately. She names it Camazotz, and more importantly, she meets someone she calls Mr. Whatsit. In the book, Mrs. Whatsit is one of the good supernatural beings who helps the protagonist. But Holly's Mr. Whatsit is Henry Creel. Not Vecna. Henry. The more human version of him that still exists somewhere in the memories. He's not fully the monster yet in whatever form Holly's encountering. He's something in between. And that distinction might be really important. The Duffers have said that Holly's storyline helps answer why Will was kidnapped in the first place. Especially as we get into Volume 2, we start to answer more and more why Will was taken and how it ties in with Holly and all of this, Matt said. Everything sort of comes full circle, which suggests there's something specific about these children that Vecna needs. It's not just that they're young and vulnerable, it's something else. Something about their connection to Hawkins or to the Wheeler and Byers families specifically. There's also the question of why Holly sees the more human side of Henry when Max has been dealing with the full Vecna version. Is it because Holly's younger and more innocent? Does Henry present differently to different people based on what they can handle? Or is the Mr. Whatsit persona a trap, a way to gain Holly's trust before he fully integrates her into his plan? I think it's a bit of both. Henry Creel was once a child himself, a lonely, misunderstood kid who felt like he didn't fit in anywhere. He might see something of himself in Holly, in Will, in all the children he's taken, and maybe there's a part of him, buried deep under decades of trauma and corruption, that still remembers what it was like to be that age. So he appears to them as Mr. Whatsit, someone less threatening, someone who seems almost kind. But it's still manipulation. It's still Vecna, just wearing a friendlier mask. Mike has a moment with Holly in Volume 1 that really shows how much she's grown. It's this big brother-protector scene where Mike realises his little sister isn't so little anymore. She's brave, she's smart, and she's in terrible danger. The Wheeler family has been fractured by all of this. Ted's in a coma, Karen's gravely injured, Nancy and Mike are out there fighting monsters, and Holly's trapped in a psychic prison. If the family survives this, they're going to be completely changed by it. Holly represents something important thematically. She's innocence under threat. She's the youngest person directly targeted by Vecna, and if he succeeds with her, if he breaks her and turns her into a vessel, then there's no line he won't cross. But if she survives, if Max protects her and they escape together, then it proves that even Vecna's darkest plans can be thwarted by people refusing to give up on each other. A Wrinkle in Time is ultimately about love defeating darkness. Meg saves her brother Charles Wallace not through violence or power, but through love. She refuses to give up on him, even when he's fully under IT's control. And Holly, armed with that story, armed with Max's protection and her own surprising bravery, might be the key to saving not just herself, but all the other trapped children. The youngest Wheeler might end up being one of the bravest, and that's exactly the kind of full-circle moment the Duffers love. But for all the kids fighting Vecna, there's one adult who's proving to be just as dangerous in her own way. Linda Hamilton didn't come out of Terminator retirement to play a minor role. Dr. K is dangerous in a completely different way than Vecna. She's not supernatural. She doesn't have powers. She can't invade your mind or kill you with a glance. But she's got the entire United States military at her disposal, a laboratory in the Upside Down, and absolutely zero moral qualms about what she's doing. In a season full of psychic monsters and reality-bending nightmares, Dr. K might be the most terrifying villain because she's just human. A human with resources and a complete lack of empathy. Dr. K is nothing like Dr. Brenner. Brenner was obsessed, conflicted, almost paternal in his twisted way. He believed he was doing important work. He cared about the children he experimented on, even if that care manifested in horrible ways. He understood the history, the mythology, the connections between everything. Dr. K doesn't have any of that. She's a blunt instrument. She sees 11 as a weapon she needs to acquire, and that's it. No complexity, no emotional baggage, just pure tactical thinking. According to what we've seen in Volume 1, Dr. K is operating out of the military base in the Upside Down. She's got Carly locked up behind a giant steel door, labelled as kryptonite, though she doesn't seem to fully understand what that means. She's dissecting the mysterious sacks from the meat wall, trying to reverse engineer whatever Vecna's doing with the children. But she's working blind. She doesn't know about Henry Creel's history. She doesn't understand the experiments that created 11 or the other numbered children. She's trying to weaponize forces. She fundamentally doesn't comprehend. That makes her incredibly dangerous, because she'll keep pushing, keep experimenting, keep escalating without any understanding of the consequences. Brenner at least knew when he was playing with fire. Dr. K doesn't even know what fire is. The military has developed ways to neutralize 11, which we see briefly when Hopper and 11 kidnap Lieutenant Eckers to interrogate him. There's tech involved, some kind of suppression field or device that can dampen psychic abilities. That's why 11's been hiding, staying off the grid. If Dr. K catches her, she's got the tools to shut 11 down completely. And then what? Dissection? Weaponization? Forcing 11 to work for the government against her will? I honestly think Dr. K represents the human tendency to militarize everything we don't understand. She's the government's worst impulses made flesh. Where Brenner was a mad scientist, Dr. K is a military strategist. And in some ways, that's worse. Brenner wanted knowledge. K wants control. There's a question of whether Dr. K gets a redemption arc or stays a villain through to the end. She could have a moment where she realizes she's in over her head, where the true scope of what Vecna is planning finally hits her. Maybe she sees the consequences of her actions when Vecna's plan starts succeeding and the military base in the Upside Down becomes a slaughterhouse. Maybe she sacrifices herself to help 11 and the others escape. Or maybe she doubles down, convinced that her way is the only way, and becomes an obstacle right up until the end. My gut says she doesn't make it out of Volume 2 alive. She's positioned as this season's human antagonist, and those characters rarely survive in horror stories. Either Vecna kills her when he realizes the military is more of a nuisance than a threat, or she dies trying to capture 11 and it backfires spectacularly. There's also the possibility that one of the creatures she's been experimenting on breaks free and tears through the base with her in it. Linda Hamilton playing this role is brilliant casting, by the way. She brings this weathered, seen-it-all authority that makes Dr. K feel like a genuine threat, even without powers. You believe she's commanded soldiers in war zones, you believe she's made impossible decisions, and you believe she'll do whatever it takes to accomplish her mission, consequences be damned. Dr. K might not have powers, but she's got resources, and that makes her just as terrifying as any monster from the Upside Down. She's proof that sometimes the scariest thing isn't what's hiding in the dark, it's what's hiding in plain sight, wearing a uniform and following orders. Speaking of entities that might be pulling everyone's strings, let's talk about the creature that's been suspiciously quiet this whole time. What if Vecna isn't the big bad? What if he's just another victim? The Mind Flayer has been suspiciously absent from Volume 1. We saw it in Season 4 when Henry encountered it in Dimension X and moulded it from particles into that spider shape. It looks like Henry was in control, like he'd found this primordial force and bent it to his will. But the Mind Flayer hasn't been mentioned at all in the first 4 episodes of Season 5. No references, no sightings, nothing. For something that was the main antagonist of Season 2 and a major presence in Season 3, that silence is deafening. The Duffers have confirmed that the connection between Vecna and the Mind Flayer will be answered in the final episode. Not Volume 2, the finale on New Year's Eve. Ross Duffer told Variety, "It's a question that will be answered in the final episode, so we're going to have to wait for that particular reveal. But I think the clues are already there, if you know where to look." Here's my theory. The Mind Flayer is the real villain. It always has been. And Henry Creel, for all his power and all his plans, is just another pawn in a much larger game. Think about it. When Henry was blasted into the Upside Down by 11, he landed in what was essentially Dimension X, a void full of storms and particles, and this massive shadowy presence, the Mind Flayer in its original form. Henry was broken, burned, barely alive, and in that vulnerable state, the Mind Flayer found him. Or maybe it was waiting for him. Either way, Henry connected with it. He thought he was controlling it, shaping it, using it to build his army and execute his revenge. But what if the Mind Flayer let him think that? What if it needed a human host, a psychic conduit, and Henry was perfect for the job? The Mind Flayer is described in the show as a hive mind. It's not just one creature. It's a collective consciousness that controls everything in the Upside Down. Demogorgons, Demodogs, the vines, all of it. That's a level of power that dwarfs even Vecna. And if the Mind Flayer has been manipulating Henry from the beginning, feeding off his trauma and rage, amplifying his worst impulses, then Henry isn't the puppet master. He's the puppet. Max made an interesting observation in Volume 1. She said Henry is a prisoner in his own mind. She's been cycling through his memories, seeing different versions of him, and she's noticed something off. There's a part of Henry that's still human, still trapped. Mister. What's it? The version Holly meets might be the real Henry Creel trying to communicate from inside his own corrupted consciousness. And Vecna might be what the Mind Flayer turned him into. If that's true, then the final battle isn't Eleven and Will and everyone else against Vecna. It's everyone, potentially including Vecna, against the Mind Flayer. The true entity that's been pulling the strings since before the show even started. The thing that's been using Henry, using the Upside Down, using everything and everyone to escape Dimension X and invade our reality. There's precedent for this in the show. In Season 2, the Mind Flayer possessed Will. It used him to spy on the group, to set traps, to spread its influence. Will was still in there, still fighting, but the Mind Flayer was in control. What if that's been Henry's situation since the moment he landed in the Upside Down? The Mind Flayer possessed him, gave him even more power to sweeten the deal, and has been using him ever since. Henry thinks he's building a new world order, but really he's just clearing the path for the Mind Flayer's invasion. Some fans have theorized that at some point in the finale, Henry will turn against the Mind Flayer. He'll realize he's been manipulated, that his entire plan has been the Mind Flayer's plan, and he'll help the kids defeat it. It would be his Darth Vader moment, the villain who gets a last-minute redemption by sacrificing himself to stop an even greater evil. And honestly, that feels very Stranger Things. The show has always been about trauma, about how pain shapes us, and about the possibility of change even when things seem hopeless. If Vecna is just a victim of the Mind Flayer, then defeating him doesn't solve anything. The Mind Flayer will just find another host, another Henry Creel, and start the cycle over again. But if they can separate Henry from the Mind Flayer, wake up whatever humanity is still buried inside him, then maybe he becomes an ally in the final fight. He knows the Mind Flayer better than anyone. He's been connected to it for decades. That knowledge could be the key to destroying it permanently. There's also the question of what the Mind Flayer actually wants. It's been described as a shadow monster, a hive mind, but what's its end game? Total domination? Consumption of all consciousness? Escape from Dimension X into our reality, where it can spread unchecked? The Duffers have kept its motivations vague, which suggests the reveal is going to be significant. I think the Mind Flayer is hungry, not in a physical sense, but in a psychic one. It feeds on suffering, on trauma, on negative emotions. That's why it targets people who are already broken, already vulnerable. It's not just about conquest, it's about sustenance. And if it successfully invades our world, if it breaks through using Vecna's 12 vessels and the opened gates, then it has access to billions of people. An infinite buffet of pain and fear. That's what makes it more terrifying than Vecna. Vecna at least used to be human. He has motivations we can understand, even if we don't agree with them. Revenge, power, the desire to reshape a world he hates. But the Mind Flayer is something else entirely. It's alien, it's ancient, and it might not even think the way we do. It's a force of nature, but worse because it's intelligent. It plans, it manipulates, it waits. The really interesting thing is how this changes the entire series if it's true. Every season, we thought we were fighting different enemies. The Demogorgon in Season 1, the Mind Flayer in Season 2, the Meat Monster in Season 3, Vecna in Season 4. But if it's all been the Mind Flayer using different tactics, different avatars, different approaches to break through into our world, then the story has been more cohesive than we realised. It's been one long campaign by a single entity to invade Earth, and we're finally at the endgame. Volume 2 probably won't answer this fully, but I think we'll get hints. Maybe Max sees something in Vecna's memories that reveals the truth. Maybe Will, through his connection to the hive mind, senses something bigger than Vecna behind everything. Maybe 8, with her illusion powers, can somehow pierce through to see what's really controlling Vecna. But the full answer comes New Year's Eve, in the finale, when everything we thought we knew gets turned upside down one last time. If the Mind Flayer is the real enemy, then Vecna might end up being the unlikely ally everyone needs, and that would be properly mental. Now, speaking of unlikely allies and mysterious connections, let's talk about the Dungeons and Dragons prophecies that keep popping up. From day one, Stranger Things has used Dungeons and Dragons as a roadmap, and the final clues are all there if you know where to look. The very first scene of Volume 1 is a D&D campaign, the Hellfire Club, with some new members since Eddie's gone, playing through what's essentially a metaphor for everything about to happen. And in that game, Erica Sinclair rolls a natural 20, a perfect roll, the absolute best you can get. And with that roll, she defeats Vecna in the campaign. The DM describes Vecna being vanquished, destroyed, sent back to whatever hell he came from. It's treated as this triumphant moment. The kids celebrate. Erica's the hero. Now, that could just be a fun opening. A bit of fan service to remind everyone that D&D is still the heart of this show. But the Duffers don't do anything randomly. That natural 20 is foreshadowing. And the math behind it is kind of brilliant. 11 plus 8 equals 19. We've got 11 with her telekinetic powers, and 8/Carly with her illusions. Two incredibly powerful psychics working together. That's 19, but it's not enough. A 19 in D&D is great, but it's not a critical success. It's not a guaranteed win. You need a 20 for that. Enter Will. Will can now channel Vecna's powers through the hive mind connection. He's effectively tapping into one's abilities. So you've got 11 plus 8 plus 1, which equals 20. The exact number Erica rolled. The exact number needed to defeat Vecna according to the game. Whether that's literal or just thematic, it's a hell of a coincidence. And I don't think it's a coincidence at all. There's also the distinction between sorcerers and wizards that I mentioned earlier. Mike calls Will a sorcerer in episode 4, not a wizard, and that matters more than you'd think. In D&D, wizards learn magic through study. They're academics. They read spellbooks, they practice, they train. Their power comes from knowledge and discipline. Sorcerers, on the other hand, are born with magic. It's in their blood, part of their identity, something they can't turn off or unlearn. Their power is innate. Will the Wise was always described as a wizard in their campaigns, but Mike's right to correct that. Will's powers didn't come from studying or training. They came from trauma, from being Vecna's first vessel, from that connection that was forced on him when he was 11 years old. His abilities are innate. He's a sorcerer. And that's actually kind of tragic when you think about it. He never asked for this. He never wanted to be powerful It was done to him, but now he's learning to weaponize it, to turn it into something that might save everyone. The cult of Vecna has been lurking in the background since season 4. Eddie ran a campaign where he introduced the concept. In D&D lore, Vecna has followers, disciples who serve him and carry out his will. It's treated as this dark cult, people who've given themselves over to a lich lord in exchange for power or knowledge or immortality. And now in season 5, that concept is becoming reality. Vecna's 12 vessels, all those kidnapped children trapped in his mindscape, they're essentially his cult. They're the followers he's been building, the army he needs to reshape the world. Some fans have theorized that the Thessal Hydra is going to show up. The Thessal Hydra is a D&D monster that was mentioned way back in season 1 during one of the kids' games. It's a many-headed beast, incredibly dangerous, nearly impossible to kill. And then in season 4, Will painted a picture of a Thessal Hydra for his D&D campaign. It's been set up twice, introduced early, referenced again later. That's classic Chekhov's gun. If you show a Thessal Hydra in Act 1, it better appear in Act 3. But honestly, I'm not sure we'll see it. The show already has so much going on with Vecna and the Mind Flayer and the 12 vessels. Adding another massive monster feels like overkill. Unless the Thessal Hydra is a form the Mind Flayer takes, or something Vecna summons as a last resort, I think it's more likely to stay as a background reference. But I could be wrong. The Duffers love their deep cuts. Then there's the Kaz theory. In D&D lore, Kaz the Bloody-Handed is a vampire lieutenant who serves Vecna but eventually betrays him. Kaz uses Vecna's own sword against him, and they destroy each other in the process. Ever since Eddie Munson died in season 4, fans have been theorizing that he'll come back as Kaz. Eddie was all about D&D. He was the DM. He died heroically in the Upside Down, surrounded by demobats. What if the Upside Down brought him back as something else? A vampire or a vampire-adjacent creature who still remembers who he was but is fundamentally changed. I love this theory. It's creative, it's thematically rich, and Joseph Quinn was absolutely brilliant as Eddie. But I don't think it's happening. Eddie got a proper send-off. Dustin told his uncle what's happened. There was closure. Bringing him back, even in an altered form, would undermine that sacrifice. The Duffers have said they don't want to do things, just to do them. Everything needs a reason to exist. And Eddie as Cass, while cool, doesn't serve the story in a way that justifies resurrecting a dead character. But the Kaz role itself might still exist. Someone's going to betray Vecna. If my theory about the Mind Flayer being the real villain is correct, then Vecna himself might be the Kaz figure. The lieutenant who turns on his master. The one who realizes he's been manipulated and decides to fight back, even if it costs him everything. That would be a proper D&D ending. The Lich and his betrayer destroying each other so the heroes can save the world. Whether the Duffers planned all of this from the beginning, or whether fans are just really good at finding patterns, the D&D connections are everywhere. The game has been the skeleton key to understanding the show since episode 1. And if that natural 20 roll from Erica is indeed foreshadowing, then 11 plus Carly plus Will is the combination that brings Vecna down. The dice don't lie. Now let's talk about the thing everyone's dreading, the confirmed death that's coming. The Duffers confirmed it. Someone's dying, and it's going to be brutal. Let's talk about who, the most violent death of any season. That's the exact phrase they used. Not just a death, not just a sad farewell. The most violent. Which means it's going to be graphic, shocking, and probably happen when we least expect it. Volume 1 had 0 major character deaths, which was honestly surprising. Usually, the Duffers kill someone early to establish stakes, but they held back. They're saving it for Volume 2 or the finale, and that makes it so much worse because we know it's coming, but we don't know when or who. Steve Harrington is the most popular prediction by a mile, and I hate that I agree with it. Steve was supposed to die in season 1. The Duffers have talked about this openly. He was written as this terrible boyfriend, the jock antagonist who gets killed off as karmic punishment. But Joe Keery's performance was so good, so layered and charming, that they kept him around. They turned him into this beloved babysitter character, the guy who evolved from selfish pretty boy to selfless protector. And now, 9 seasons later, that original plan might finally come to fruition. There's a narrative elegance to Steve dying. His character arc is complete. He's grown. He's changed. He's become the person he was always meant to be. And in storytelling terms, that's when characters are most vulnerable. When they've reached the end of their journey, when there's nowhere left for them to grow, that's when the story can let them go. Then there's the love triangle. Steve, Nancy and Jonathan have been stuck in this unresolved tension since season 2. Nancy chose Jonathan, but her feelings for Steve never fully disappeared. In season 4, Steve talked about his future with Nancy, the RV, and the 6 kids and the domestic dream. And Nancy listened. She didn't shut him down. She actually seemed to consider it. But Jonathan's still there, still part of her life, still someone she cares about. If Steve dies saving Nancy or Jonathan, that resolves everything. It gives Steve a heroic exit. It cements his transformation from selfish to selfless. And it devastates everyone watching, which is exactly the kind of emotional gut punch the Duffers love. Nancy and Jonathan would be free to move forward together, but they'd carry the weight of Steve's sacrifice forever. It's tragic, it's earned, and it fits the story perfectly. There's also the fight-to-death pact between Steve and Dustin that's teased in the trailer. I don't know what that means exactly, but it sounds ominous. Those two have the best friendship on the show, the big brother-little brother dynamic. If Steve dies and Dustin has to watch it happen, Gaten Matarazzo is going to break our hearts with that performance. I'm not going to lie, I'm proper worried about Steve. Jonathan Byers is another possibility. He's been sidelined for the past couple seasons, dealing with personal stuff and not really getting major storylines. Charlie Heaton has been busy with other projects, and if the Duffers need to trim the cast for the finale, Jonathan's a candidate. His death would devastate Joyce and Will, which gives it emotional weight, but it would also feel slightly random unless Volume 2 builds it up properly. Jonathan hasn't had enough focus lately for his death to feel earned the way Steve's would. Murray Bauman is the expendable adult. He's comedy relief, which in horror movies means he's basically wearing a red shirt. Murray's been in dangerous situations constantly, and he survived through luck and sarcasm. But luck runs out eventually. His death wouldn't break the show the way losing Steve or Jonathan would, but it would hit hard for Joyce and Hopper. Murray's been their friend, their translator, their conspiracy theorist ally. Losing him would hurt. Then there's the question of who definitely won't die. Eleven's safe, I think. Her story is too central. She's the one who opened the first gate. She's probably the one who has to close them permanently. If anyone's sacrificing themselves at the end to seal the Upside Down forever, it's her. But I don't think that happens until the finale, not Volume 2. Max has to survive Volume 2. She's been kept alive for a reason. The Duffers could have killed her at the end of Season 4, but they didn't. She's been trapped in Vecna's mind for 584 days. And that suffering needs to mean something. If she dies in Episode 6 trying to escape, it would feel cruel, like all that trauma was for nothing. I think Max makes it to the finale. At minimum, Lucas won't die. The Duffers are aware of the horror trope, where black characters die first or die unnecessarily. They're not going to fall into that. Lucas has been through enough watching Max suffer. Killing him off would serve no narrative purpose and would feel gratuitous. Will definitely survives Volume 2. His story is the core of the entire series. He's the key to defeating Vecna. If Will dies before the finale, the show loses its emotional center. He might die in the finale itself as some kind of ultimate sacrifice, but not before then. Hopper and Joyce are probably safe until the finale as well. They're the parental figures. Killing them in Volume 2 would destabilize too much. Which brings us back to Steve, Jonathan or Murray. One of them, maybe two, probably doesn't make it out of Volume 2 alive. There's also the possibility of a surprise death. Someone we're not expecting. Maybe one of the younger kids. Erica has been in danger several times. Mike has been reckless. Robin's trapped in the Upside Down with Steve. any of them could be the most violent death the Duffers promised. To be honest, I think it's Steve. The setup is too perfect, the narrative arc is complete, the emotional impact would be massive. And the Duffers have been sitting on that original Season 1 plan for 9 years. This is their chance to finally execute it in a way that honours who Steve became, rather than who he was supposed to be. But I really hope I'm wrong. I'd be gutted if Steve dies, properly devastated. He's one of the best characters on the show, and Joe Keery deserves to see him through to the end. Whoever it is, it's going to hurt. The Duffers don't make these decisions lightly. They know how much we care about these characters, and that's exactly why they're going to break our hearts. Death isn't the only way to say goodbye, though. Let's talk about the relationships that need resolution before everything ends. With only 4 episodes left total, every relationship needs a proper ending. Here's what I think we'll see. Mike and Will have been building to something for 5 seasons. Their friendship has always been the emotional core of the party, but there's been this unspoken tension, this weight that Will's been carrying since the beginning. In Volume 1, Robin's conversation with Will about self-acceptance was the trigger that unlocked his powers. She told him she was looking for answers in someone else, but she had all the answers. And Will applied that to himself. He stopped looking outward for validation and found strength in who he actually is. Noah Schnapp has promised that the conclusion of Will and Mike's relationship will be real, authentic representation. He's talked about how important it is to him that Will's journey feels genuine, not tokenized or rushed. We've known Will is gay since Season 4 made it explicit with his monologue to Mike about feeling different. And Mike has been Will's closest friend, the person he's loved in ways he couldn't fully articulate or act on. Volume 2 needs to address this. Not necessarily romantically, because Mike's with 11, but emotionally. Will deserves to be seen and accepted fully by the person who matters most to him. I think there's going to be a moment where Will and Mike have a real conversation. No metaphors, no hiding behind D&D campaigns or coded language. Just 2 friends who've known each other since childhood, finally being honest about who they are and what they mean to each other. That's the resolution Will needs. Not requited love, but unconditional acceptance. The Steve, Nancy, Jonathan triangle has been dragging for years, and Volume 2 has to end it one way or another. All 3 of them are trapped in the upside down together, which is either going to force a resolution or make things impossibly awkward. If Steve dies, like I suspect he will, that's the resolution. Nancy and Jonathan move forward together, carrying Steve's memory. But if Steve survives, then Nancy has to choose. And honestly, I think she chooses Jonathan. They have history. They have shared trauma. Jonathan understands her in ways Steve, for all his growth, never quite has. Steve's arc isn't about getting the girl. It stopped being about that seasons ago. His arc is about becoming the person he always could have been. The protector, the babysitter, the guy who shows up when people need him. Whether he ends up with Nancy or not, whether he lives or dies, Steve's already won his story. Lucas and Max break my heart. Lucas has been sitting beside Max's hospital bed for 584 days, playing Kate Bush, holding her hand, talking to her, even though she can't respond. That's devotion. That's love in its purest form. If Max wakes up, if she escapes Vecna's mindscape and comes back to him, their reunion is going to wreck us. Caleb McLaughlin and Sadie Sink have incredible chemistry, and you know they're going to deliver that moment with everything they've got. But there's also the possibility that Max doesn't fully come back, that she's changed by her time in Vecna's mind, that she carries scars Lucas can't see or heal. Sometimes love means accepting that the person you care about isn't the same person anymore, and loving them anyway. Eleven's journey has always been about finding her own identity outside of what other people want her to be. She's been a weapon for Brenna, a daughter for Hopper, a girlfriend for Mike. And she's been all those things willingly, because she cares about these people. But Volume 2 needs to show 11 making choices for herself. Fighting Vecna because she wants to, not because someone told her to. Using her powers on her terms. Defining who she is independent of everyone else's expectations. Her relationship with Carly is part of that. They're sisters. They both survived Hawkins' lab, and now they're working together not because someone forced them to, but because they chose each other. That's powerful. Hopper and Joyce have earned their happiness. They've been through hell multiple times. Russian prison, literal monsters, losing Bob, almost losing their kids. If anyone deserves a peaceful ending, it's them. I think they survive. I think they get their cabin in the woods or whatever quiet life they've been dreaming about. They've suffered enough. Dustin and Steve's friendship is one of the best things the show ever created. That fight-to-death pact in the trailer suggests they're going to face something terrible together. And whether they both survive it or not, that bond is unbreakable. Dustin learned how to be brave from Steve. Steve learned how to care about something bigger than himself from Dustin. They made each other better. Robin and Vicky are established. They're happy together. The show doesn't need to do much more with them beyond showing they're still solid. And then there's the party as a whole. Mike, Will, Lucas, Dustin, 11, Max. They're not kids anymore. They've grown up, literally and figuratively. The actors are in their 20s now. The characters have faced things that would break most adults. This is the last time they'll all be together like this. After the finale, they'll go their separate ways. College, careers, whatever comes next. The show has always been about the magic of childhood friendship, but it's also about accepting that childhood ends. You carry the people with you, but you can't stay in the same place forever. That's the bittersweet truth the finale will probably hammer home. They'll win. They'll defeat Vecna and the Mind Flayer and save Hawkins. But the cost is growing up and moving on. These relationships have defined the show. They deserve endings that honour where they've been and where they're going. Now let's talk about what the episode titles themselves tell us about the journey ahead. The Duffers don't pick episode titles randomly. Each one is a roadmap to what's coming. Episode 5 is called Shock Jock. That's an interesting choice. Shock Jock typically refers to radio DJs who use controversial or shocking content to get attention. But it could also mean something more literal. A shock, like electricity. A jock, like an athlete or someone physical. Or maybe it's about communication, about getting a message through. Ross Duffer said this episode is far darker and far scarier than anything in Volume 1, and it picks up immediately after Sorcerer. So whatever happened at the end of Episode 4, the consequences hit instantly. No breathing room, no time jump, just straight into the nightmare. I think Shock Jock might involve Will losing control of his powers. He's just discovered he can tap into the hive mind, and he's probably going to push too hard too fast. Maybe he hurts someone accidentally. Maybe Vecna takes advantage of the connection and turns it against him. The shock could be emotional, the realization that Will's new abilities come with a cost he wasn't prepared for. And if someone dies in this episode, if this is where the most violent death happens, the title takes on a whole different meaning. Shock as in trauma, as in the thing that changes everything. Episode 6, Escape from Camazotz, is the most straightforward title of the three. Max and Holly are trapped in Vecna's mindscape, which Holly named Camazotz after a wrinkle in time. This episode is about them getting out. The Duffers said it's the longest episode of Volume 2 at 75 minutes, and it's the one that makes them cry every time they watch it. That tells me the escape isn't clean. Someone doesn't make it, or someone makes a sacrifice to let the others go. Or Max succeeds in freeing Holly and the other kids, but has to stay behind herself. Escape from Camazotz is also the title that suggests Carly's involvement most directly. If her illusion powers can project into mindscapes, this is where she proves her worth. She creates the distraction, or the shield, that lets Max execute the plan. And maybe Carly herself doesn't survive it. Maybe projecting illusions into Vecna's mind while he's actively hunting the kids burns her out completely. That would explain why the Duffers cry. Kaylee's return would be brief but heroic, a redemption arc compressed into one episode. Episode 7 is The Bridge. This is the penultimate episode of the entire series, and it was co-directed by Matt and Ross Duffer along with Sean Levy. That tells you how important it is. Every piece needs to be in place by the end of this one. The finale can't waste time on setup. It needs to be pure climax and resolution. But what's the bridge? Is it a literal bridge? A location where something crucial happens? Is it a metaphorical bridge between worlds? Between the upside down and reality? Between Vecna and humanity? Between the past and the future? Or is it about Will, who's literally a bridge between Vecna and the heroes through the hive mind connection? The Duffers called this the most emotional chapter of the season, aside from the finale. That suggests big character moments, reunions maybe, the group finally coming back together after being scattered across Hawkins and the Upside Down. Or goodbyes, people saying things they've needed to say for years because they know they might not get another chance. I think the bridge is where all the separated storylines converge. Steve's group escapes the Upside Down. Max and Holly break free from Camazotz. Eleven and Carly join forces. Will fully accepts his role as the key to everything. And everyone prepares for the final confrontation in Episode 8. The bridge between Volume 2 and the finale. The bridge between who they were and who they need to become. And then there's Episode 8, the right side up, the inverse of the upside down, the restoration of balance, or at least the promise of it. The finale is 2 hours and 5 minutes, which is basically a feature film. It's being shown in 500 theatres across the US and Canada, which tells you how seriously Netflix is taking this. They want people to experience the ending together, in a communal setting, the way you would for a major movie event. And the Duffers have been planning this ending since before the show premiered. They know how it ends, they've always known. The right side up suggests things go back to normal. The world is saved, the gates are closed, Hawkins is restored. But normal doesn't mean the same. These characters are fundamentally changed. They can't go back to being kids playing D&D in a basement. They've seen too much, lost too much, fought too hard. The right side up might mean the world is physically repaired, but the emotional scars remain. Or maybe it's a false hope. Maybe the title is ironic. The right side up, but nothing's actually right. I don't think that's likely though. The Duffers have talked about this being a satisfying ending. Bittersweet probably, but earned. The titles alone tell a story. From shock to escape to bridge to restoration. That's the arc. That's the journey we're about to take. Now let's talk about some of the smaller details that might matter more than we think. Stranger Things. Music moments are legendary, and Volume 2 promises something we haven't seen before. Matt Duffer said there are some really cool but very different musical moments in Volume 2 and in the finale. He specifically emphasized very different, which is interesting because the show has a pretty established pattern with music. Running Up That Hill saved Max in Season 4. Master of Puppets was Eddie's heroic last stand. Never Ending Story was Dustin and Susie's bizarre but perfect duet in Season 3. These moments are huge. They trend on social media. They send old songs back to the top of the charts. Kate Bush's career had a whole renaissance because of Season 4. So what does very different mean? I think it means we're not getting another licensed needle drop as the big moment. Or at least not in the same way. Maybe the big musical moment in Volume 2 is silence. Complete absence of sound while something horrific or beautiful happens. That would be very different from the show's usual approach. Or maybe it's an original score moment where Kyle Dixon and Michael Stein's synth work take center stage instead of a recognizable song. There's also the possibility of a live performance, someone singing or playing an instrument within the scene itself. Will's connection to Should I Stay or Should I Go from Season 1 was deeply personal. That was his and Jonathan's song. If there's a moment in Volume 2 where music becomes a weapon or a shield against Vecna, it might be something performed live rather than played on a stereo. The Christmas Day release date is interesting too. Volume 2 drops on December 25th. Is there any chance they'd use a Christmas song? That would be properly unexpected. Imagine a climactic battle scene set to something like Carol of the Bells or a darker holiday track. It would be bizarre, but the Duffers love subverting expectations. The finale is where Matt specifically mentioned very different musical moments as well. And that's being shown in theatres, which means the sound design and score are going to be crafted for a cinematic experience. Big speakers, proper surround sound. Whatever music they use in the finale is meant to be felt physically, not just heard. I'm also curious if they'll bring back any themes from earlier seasons. The show's main title theme is iconic, but there are other recurring musical motifs that have defined certain characters or moments. If this is truly the end, the finale should incorporate those callbacks. A musical greatest hits, but earned and emotional rather than just nostalgic. One thing I'm fairly confident about is that Max's story will involve music again. Running Up That Hill almost brought her back once. Lucas was playing it next to her hospital bed. If she escapes from Camazotz, if she wakes up from her coma, music is probably part of that moment. Whether it's the same song or something new, sound is tied to her survival. There's also the question of what was popular in 1987, which is when season 5 is set. The show has always been meticulous about period-accurate music choices. What was on the radio in full 1987? What would these characters actually be listening to? U2, Whitney Houston, George Michael, Bon Jovi. Any of those could work depending on the emotional tone they're going for. To be honest, I'm more excited about the music moments than almost anything else. The Duffers have never missed with their song choices. Every major musical moment in the show has been perfect. The right song at the right time for the right emotional impact. And if they're promising that Volume 2 and the finale have very different musical moments, that means they're swinging for something we've never seen before. Whatever it is, it'll be perfect. The Duffers haven't missed yet. And while we're talking about returns and callbacks, there's one character coming back that nobody expected to see again. Remember Barb? Of course you do. Everyone remembers Barb. And she's coming back. Shannon Purser is confirmed to appear in Volume 2, which is wild considering Barb died in Season 1. She was killed by a Demogorgon while Nancy was off with Steve at his pool party. And that death, that moment, has haunted Nancy ever since. It's been the source of her guilt, her drive to expose the truth, her need to make things right. Barb's death in Episode 3 of Season 1 sparked one of the biggest fan movements in recent TV history. Justice for Barb became a rallying cry. People made t-shirts. The Duffers had to address it in interviews. Barb became more iconic in death than she probably would have been if she'd survived. But now she's back, at least in some form. The most likely scenario is that Barb appears in Vecna's memories or in Nancy's guilt-induced visions. Nancy's trapped in the Upside Down with Steve, Jonathan, Robin, and Dustin. She's vulnerable, she's exhausted, and Vecna has a history of targeting people through their trauma and guilt. He did it with Max and her brother Billy. He could absolutely do it with Nancy and Barb. Imagine Nancy seeing Barb again. Not as she was at the end, broken and dead in the Upside Down, but as she was at the beginning. Alive, loyal, trying to be a good friend while Nancy pulled away. That confrontation, even if it's just a vision or a memory, would devastate Nancy. Because the truth is, Nancy chose Steve over Barb that night. She chose popularity and romance over friendship. And Barb died because of it. That's not actually Nancy's fault. Barb's death was a Demogorgon attack, a consequence of the Upside Down's existence, not Nancy's choices. But guilt doesn't work on logic. Nancy has been carrying this for years. Barb's return, even briefly, gives her a chance to face that guilt directly, to say the things she never got to say, to apologize, to grieve, to finally let go. Shannon Purser's career has taken off since Stranger Things. She was in Sierra Burgess as a loser. She played Ethel on Riverdale. She's done a bunch of other projects. Getting her back for even one scene is a statement. The Duffers aren't bringing Barb back as a cheap nostalgia play. They're doing it because Nancy's arc needs this closure. There's also the possibility that Barb appears in the Mindscape with Max and Holly. Vecna consumes his victims. Part of them survives inside his memories. Max has been encountering different aspects of Vecna's past while trapped in Camazotz. What if Barb is there too? What if she's been trapped all this time, just like Max, cycling through memories and trying to survive? That would be heartbreaking, but it would also give Barb agency. She wouldn't just be a symbol of Nancy's guilt. She'd be a person still fighting, still trying to escape. I don't think that's likely, though. Barb's been dead for too long. If she was going to be revealed as alive in Vecna's mindscape, it would have happened in Volume 1 when they introduced the concept. More probably, she appears as a vision, a memory, or a manifestation of Nancy's trauma. Either way, Barb's return is going to hit hard. For Nancy, for the audience, for everyone who's been demanding justice for Barb since 2016. She's finally getting her moment, and Shannon Purser is going to make it count. Barb's return might be brief, but for Nancy, it could be everything she needs to finally move forward. And speaking of moving forward while looking back, let's bring this all home. And that, my dear friends, is where we'll end tonight's predictions. I've covered a lot: Will's powers, Vecna's plan, the Mind Flayer theory, death predictions, relationship resolutions. Everything, I think, is coming in these next 3 episodes. But here's the truth. I could be completely wrong about all of it. The Duffers have been planning this for a decade, and they've surprised us every single time. Volume 2 drops on Christmas Day. 3 episodes that will either confirm these theories or completely blow them apart. Then the finale on New Year's Eve wraps everything up. So enjoy these last few days of not knowing, because once Volume 2 hits, everything changes. Grab your loved ones, prepare the tissues, and get ready for the beginning of the end. Until next time, stay safe and sweet dreams.